Well, this request came from the same person that requested Quick Tip 571, and you'll notice the photograph or the reference is the same reference. But the question this time, the second question, was about this little batch of trees right here. And she asked, is that group of green textured trees uh, a part of the shadow or a part of the light in setting up the Notan? It was about the Notan. But I'm going to address it. I'm going to address that part and something else too. Well, let's look at this area right here. And we see that if you squint, you can see this area, it really is in shadow. Now, I addressed in the previous quick tip how the light is screwy here because there are clouds that are, the light's coming through clouds are casting shadows and so on. So it makes it kind of screwy. What we have to do there is to read what we see. And we see this whole area right here in shadow, but a tiny bit of light right here. So it's a very, very low light that we see right there. So I think, and we address what happens in Notan, as I referred to in Quick Tip 571, is that we would consider the reflected light right there. Now, reflected light only shows in shadow because a light that's reflecting, it means it's coming from someplace other than the sun. It might be reflecting from clouds or could be a little bit of light filtering through there. But when you squint at it, it's part of this shadow pattern. So I would set that up. You squint, if I hope you will. You see this is a tiny bit lighter right here, but most of this is really a part of the shadow. But then what about the value of that? Well, if we put the value scale next to it, and this is a way of referring to value, we can see that it really does fall in that shadow value right there. Do you see that? So that's on the shadow side. We fall in the shadow. What I really want to address, in addition to that, is are these really green? Now, the photo, the photo on the monitor, on my monitor, showed just a hint of green. But really, when you look at it, it's a very, very low saturated. So I want to do just a little bit of a demonstration there and address that issue because a lot of times when we're looking at trees that are not in direct sunlight, trees in the mountains that might be in shadow, or sometimes it will be trees that are in a sunset. If they are trees that are evergreens, or even in the summer months, trees that have green leaves on them, sometimes we misinterpret what we know about green, and we will paint them green and they won't look right because that's not what our eyes are really seeing. Other things will happen if there's not enough light here shining in this area to show us that green, then the yellow in that green goes away. So I want to do just a little bit of something for you in demonstration for just this little area right here, just a little bit of something to show you how that works. And so to do that, first of all, let's just start with a blue here, and I'll put it right over here. Now, we could start with the yellow-green. We could start with anything. Could start with the green. But I'll just start with the blue, and I'm going to pull just a tiny bit of yellow, enough yellow into that blue to lean it towards green and keep it relatively dark. And see, about that same value. Now this might be what you think you're seeing, but if you look at that, when I compare them, the value is the same, but the color is not. All right, so that means then that instead of that being interpreted as green, it needs to be desaturated. And so what we'll do there, I'll reach over first of all for just a little bit of the transparent oxide red, which is really a red orange. But let's use that because the orange is going to desaturate the blue, and the red that's in there is going to desaturate the green. So if we do that and pull that saturation way down, see, that's one reason it really is helpful to know what color does to color. So if you have a color like red orange, for example, and if we would need that red orange to desaturate these bluer colors that we see there that are leaning towards more neutral. And so if in that case, we could use that same red orange to desaturate the green, because it's the red desaturates the red desaturates the green, the orange desaturates the blue. So that's a good thing to know. Now, if we do that, we see that'd be a little bit too dark. So then we add just a touch of white to it, and I'll show you. And then we'll do just a little bit of demonstration. That's too much white. The tendency, a lot of people, the tendency is to add too much white, and then it's muddy. Okay, can you see there? There, that right there is the color we're seeing. So how that would plot, if you were doing a painting, it would go something like this. So we'll start right over here with the blue, because we're seeing lots of desaturated blue in here, and we have seen various values. See lots of tree shapes in here that really obviously are in shadow, and we don't really see them as green, do we? No, we don't. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to create, I'm going to desaturate this blue now with this red orange, and let's see, I'll just pull myself a little pile right here, just enough to work with, and show you how we can do that. So desaturate. Now, this particular, what the red orange does there is it desaturates that blue and leans it just slightly, a little bit slightly towards the green, the yellow. All right, so I'm going to bring that down. I'll just put it right here, right there. Now, and I'm going to pull just enough white. Let's do it this way. We'll create a middle value of that with white right here. Now, do you see with the logic of that? And see how desaturated that is now? See, it really reads more as gray, doesn't it? So let's get that middle value. All right, now, well, it needs to be just a tiny bit lighter to get it, darker, to get it desaturated to middle value. Put just a little bit more of that in there. See, so it's always a good idea to compare when you're mixing values, to compare what you're seeing. Now let's see. There we go. That is the value I'm looking for. And can you see how close to that this is? On the palette, it really doesn't look like it's that. It looks more neutral on the palette, but there it looks a little bit blurred. So what I'm going to do, just for safety now, we're going to bring a blue up here and just pull the pure blue here, because we will see some variation there. Just a tiny bit of white in there and pull that to middle value. Now what I'll have as a middle value, and remember the middle value acts as a transition between light and shadow. And so you can see here, this is a little bit, no, okay. You see there, that is in that, what I call shallow shadow. Very, very, very desaturated, but middle value, sitting right there between. All right, so let's try this now. And we're looking at this little area right here. So I'll start with that dark. Let's get just a little bit of this. I'll start with that darkest value I see. I always like to start with the dark, so I'll start with that dark value. Now, I usually like to set the Notan first, but for the sake of time, just to show you how this whole thing works and how that green, how we can make that feel like it's green, but it won't be that green. All right, so the darker parts would be, I'm gonna get that just a little bit larger. Just a little bit larger, because I want you to be able to see that. Now, so what I'm just sort of blocking in now, blocking in this little section right here. That's sort of how we would block that in. Maybe I'll reach in just a little bit more of that blue in there and give that, okay. Now, and so that little section that's going down there like that would be sort of like this. And then, see, I thought a bit better just block in this little section behind right here that would represent that, this little area. Remember, I'm just doing a little bit of a section for you there to show you how this works. How color and value work in shadow areas, and how shadow areas can actually obscure the color. In other words, what shadow areas do is they, if you think about, there are not enough light rays bouncing from other areas in shadow areas for us to see all the hue that's in there. So up here we can see bundles of hue of this blue-green, greenish blue. See, bundles of that because the light's hitting it very, very strong. Here we're not. Here we're not. Here we're seeing very little hue. And so it's more or less a value study, although we're paying attention to what little bit of hue we see. All right, so now, then in this area, you see these are the same, pretty much in the same value range. So we'll begin right here. That may be a little bit on the light side. So I'll just move over here and let's try it. And then first of all, I want to compare. Yeah, I do have it too light. So this, if you make things happen on your palette first, before you hit the painting, works a whole lot better. All right, so we have the trees coming in right here, which is, we would put about right here, and then this section right here would be right here, would be what we were interpreting this section to be right here. I'll just kind of scrub this little patch in here like that. And then we see some of that up in here. Let's get up in here. We see some of that in here. And then we might as well just go on up in here like this, where that light with the light meets both the shallow shadow area and that dark shadow area there. And of course those trees are creating that dark shadow area there. All right, so now let's see, do I have enough in there now that I can demonstrate that patch? Let's see, I need to pull that. All right, I'll go ahead and go with that. Now here we go. For that patch of trees that we see there, we're starting out by seeing it very cool and dark right here. So we'll start out with that dark right here, and that ends up being, let's see, about a little intersection like that, and it kind of moves up like that. Now we describe to ourselves what we're seeing, which is the best way to work out a situation like this. Just describe to yourself what you're seeing. Now, what am I seeing in terms of value comparison? I'm seeing this area right here just a little bit darker than that. And so what we'll do there, and then what brush strokes do we'll use, we'll worry about that later. Right now, let's just think about that in terms of block in. All right, so I'm going to move up into this area right here of the green. I'm going to give it just a little, knock it down just a little bit with that white. Now you see that doesn't really look green, does it? On the palette, it doesn't really look green. But if I put it right here, it begins to feel more like a green. keep that in the same value. I think I might have that a little bit on the dark side right there. You see it right there. So I'm going to work that in right in there and get just a little bit lighter as we go up. I'm going to pull a little bit more white down here so I have control over that. And let's move it up now. All right, so we get this part right in here. Just see I'm working my brush, just barely moving into that light. Let's go up here. You can see these areas right up here. As we move them into here, you see how that begins to feel more green. And see here, it barely has any feeling of green at all. It's because of what color does to color. Because if we just are looking at this little section by itself, up here, for example, you see it just looks gray. But we put it next to that blue there, and the blue helps of the blue or the dark also helps to pull out that feeling of yellow. And then there we go. There we go. So it doesn't take much. So this is what I wanted to emphasize to you as far as what you see of what you think is green. Always double check it and be sure that you're not making that green too green. In other words, you wouldn't want to reach for just a yellow green without desaturating it in order to interpret that part right in there. So see how much greener this is beginning to look now as I'm working into this part right here. So I'm going to go ahead and do just a little bit more of that. And let's see, I have that backwards. Well, it doesn't matter as long as I get the color right. Because I know it, see, we push that up into the wet paint, and that begins to give that feeling of what we see in those trees, just like that. Now I'll pull it back down and blend it into these darker colors and using that same stroke like that. Now I'll leave just a little bit there to interpret as it being a little bit lighter, but I want you to notice there how close that is in value. And so this would then interpret, this right here would interpret what we're actually seeing right there, keeping the comparison of this very, very dark there against not much lighter, just a little bit lighter, but still keeping it in that shadow or that middle value, dark middle value area, and then letting it vary in some areas, be just a little bit lighter in other areas. That gives us then that feeling of it seems more green. And we build all that around like that, and there we are. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.